Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Sure. Yeah, happy to kind of jump in. So thank you guys so much for having me. I'm super excited to chat with all of you. And please, throughout this conversation, just let's make it a conversation. I kind of want to give you guys a little bit of background on myself and kind of how I really want to tell a story of algorithmic art through my lens for a second. So I am Sofia Garcia. I'm the founder and the curator of ARTXCODE, an art house dedicated to supporting the algorithmic arts community through exhibitions, special projects, and private sales. I also do a ton of advising for both artists and collectors entering the space. So I really kind of want to start off with what is generative art, and then I'll continue to kind of give a little bit of background on how we got here. So let's get started. Uh, Here we go. So, what is generative art? So, generative art here, is this idea of using a system. It's actually it's a pretty neutral term, this umbrella term that, this idea of using a system, whether a set of natural language rules, a machine, procedural invention that is set into motion with some degree of autonomy, contributing to or resulting in a completed work of art. So, there's this idea of surprise automation in that final output. So the term algorithmic art is, in my opinion, a subset of generative art, and this idea that the system is created with a custom computer program. So this idea of writing your own program to create a visual system is really what my interest is in, and something that I'm really, really passionate about. So I kind of want to give you some, why. So I have a background more in the art side of things from back in the day. So these photos are probably around 2011, 2012. In Miami, I was really into street art. So I am very into hip hop. I worked with Wu-Tang Clan to do a really cool like trumpet situation here at a gallery in Miami's Wynwood district. All these photos are pretty much in Wynwood. If you've been to Miami, it looks rather different now, but it really does really just honor the street art movement, which I thought was really, really fun. But during this time, I was studying art history. I was really into it, and I started working at a contemporary Chinese art gallery called Art Lai Xing. And during that time, I really quickly realized that, the traditional route of fine art just wasn't for me. I loved it. I really wanted to be engaged with it, but I also wanted to be able to support myself and have a living and be able to, afford a place to live and so on and so forth. So I ended up pivoting into taking some computer programming classes. And so the first class I took was a free class, and it's actually online, called CS50, and you learn how to write C, which was very difficult, but also very, very exciting for me once I finally started to see that there are people behind technology. So, I would go see something, an exhibition, or I'll see some sort of, tech-friendly artwork like this and kind of just assume that it existed. Back in the day, same thing with with a website. You would just go onto a website and it exists. And so once I started to learn how to code, I started to see something like this, and I would see the person behind it. And so for the first time, I was like, who did this? How did, this omniscient, all-knowing thing kind of shattered, and now I really just saw the people behind the wheel. And so I really got took a deep dive into the history of computer graphics. So you can think of generative art as we are now, where we are now, really have to give it to those who came before us. So we have John Whitney, who created the first John Whitney, who created the first computer animation in a movie. So this is Vertigo by Alfred Hitchcock. If you watch the movie, it was the first example of someone actually using a computer, to animate something, and especially for an open scene, no less. And then, one of the queens, Vera Molnar, you'll probably see her name thrown around a lot on Twitter because her impact cannot go unnoticed. She would sneak into her husband's lab at night. And so if you I don't know if you can see here, but it says job from Molnar. And so the reason she did that was so that people would assume that it was her husband's work, and they would just kind of like leave it alone and not touch it. But she really had this idea of breaking down the form of a square and to its extreme. And so she really always kind of imagined the systemic way of creating, and for her the computer really unlocked that. I also wanted to take a moment to recognize Chuck Surrey. It is, you know, great to say that he actually passed just this weekend. We were working with his wife, I mean, with his daughter, and the trust of his practice to kind of start working on some new projects. So, his impact cannot go unnoticed. He was considered, the father of digital art and computer animation. So, for those of you who are not familiar with Chuck Surrey, I definitely recommend you check out his work. This piece here was created in 1965. He used punch cards, which is so cool. And I think one of the coolest things about this piece specifically is that he kept so the way that it worked, he had these different XY coordinates, but he kept the X coordinate, I believe, the same. I know that I have this here written down, but pretty much this idea of the distorting the way, the vision in which you see it. And so there was some parallels there with the Cubist movements, and without having color still finds a way to evoke some of the emotive qualities of expressionism, which I think is really cool. So we take a look at the history of all of this, and then we can't jump all the way over to where we are now. So we have this period here of the 1960s, 1980s, up until the 2000s, of people kind of experimenting with computers. But it really wasn't until Casey Reese and Ben Fry came out with processing that things really changed the game. And what they did was really unlock this idea of creating a tool to make coding accessible for artists and to make creating art more accessible to engineers. And so now we take a look at it, and we have this P5 editor. It's been all these things, but the vocabulary in which they even created the library is so important to talk about. And so they really allowed things to open up. And so kind of in the process of all of this stuff and the journey that I was in, I became obsessed with P5. I would find myself every weekend, every day, honestly, just watching Dan Schiffman's videos on YouTube. So if you are interested in generative art in any capacity, I cannot tell you enough how important it is to watch Dan Schiffman on YouTube. I'm pretty sure that the name of the channel now is The Coding Rainbow. So please check it out. He is incredible. He's a professor at NYU, and you can watch all of this stuff for free. So during this time, I was really into it. And in Miami, there was obviously this need to start working with girls from underprivileged homes, a lot of them in Little Havana. And so I started working with a lot of students here alone. And so then, kind of just wanting to show like one of the last shows that we did, like pure NFT, was Yuma Kishi in 2020. Again, just experimenting, showcasing artists. Yuma Kishi is a Japanese artist. And what was really cool was that, this was their take on Western culture, which I thought was really wonderful and beautiful. So now that we've hit 2020, it's time to introduce Artblocks, and I think it's really important to talk about the impact that Artblocks has made into the generative arts community as we know it today. So they are obviously heavily inspired by Snowfro, Eric Calderon, the CEO of Artblocks, heavily inspired by CryptoPunks. Rightly so. They change so much in the way that we think about generative projects, NFTs, they are truly, like, one of considered they impacted the creation of the ERC 721 standard, token standard. So we have a lot to thank them for, and most, for inspiring Eric to create Artblocks. And so why Artblock? I would work with these artists and really try to hone in on one or two pieces that we would showcase, and then from there, we'd get this printed. We had this recreation of it, essentially the snapshot of it. And change with Artblocks was that for the first time, what you're actually purchasing is this algorithm. You're interacting with the algorithm, and so every single piece here is a unique output. As a collector with Artblocks, you are invoking this algorithm when you decide to mint something, and the code is part of the token. And so, as a collector, I think it's really, and as a geek for generative art, I think it's really, really amazing to see how this changed. So in February 2021, Dimitri did his Ringers project, and this was my first introduction into Artblocks. And at this time, as you can see previously, like, I had been selling his work for some time, and when he told me that there were going to be 1,000 of them, I was like, okay, cool, that sounds great, this is going to be crazy. And he's like, well, buy one. And I said, okay, I'll buy one later today, fine. Everything was sold out within 15 minutes. And to me, that blew my mind. I was like, who are all these people who one care about generative art, let alone to buy 1,000 of them in 15 minutes, given the fact that just the years prior, like, it always took a few days just to sell, at least 16 artworks. So this changed so much. And, this idea of being able to collect, the performative act of this work running in the browser, you can see it live, you can actually see it in its native format, is really special, really beautiful, and something that I will forever be grateful to Artblocks for, really just bringing this into the forefront, into everyone's mind, that who anyway, if they want to engage with the with the generative art space. But at the same time, I think it's important to talk about what the Beeple sale did. I think that this sale really started the hype for getting a lot of people involved and engaged with NFTs, for better or for worse. And so I think, last year we saw all of these really loves this movement and the artists, to see it really treated as a commodity. It still is frustrating, to see that happen. And so we saw a lot of these auction houses and stuff just kind of start flinging shows together and just throwing everything on. Just throwing things on TV screens. People assume, okay, this is digital artwork, it should live on a TV screen because that's what we do. And I was vehemently against that. And so I decided to organize a show in December, and really kind of wanted to talk about and change the conversation of how we view and experience digital art, generative art, in a way that, just commands the respect that it deserves. And so for me, this was a really big moment to show the world, especially in Miami during Art Basel, Miami being this huge crypto town where things can get really tacky, and you see people walking, like women in bikinis trying to sell shit coins at different events. And I really wanted people to I wanted people to come in and see generative art and understand why it was selling the way that it was selling, why it is so incredible. And it was a really special moment for the community as a whole, and experimenting with the way that we display digital native artworks. And so this idea that everything has to be on a TV screen doesn't really make sense. And I think it's a paradigm shift in the way that we think about artwork, whereas before someone would draw on a canvas and then I would buy that canvas. Now we're working in a way that we are acquiring digital native artworks, but we get to decide how we want to present it and bring it into our physical space. And I think that's really, really powerful, and it unlocks a lot of different possibilities. So with the squiggle, for example, we had the squiggle on display as a hologram. And that was, for me, I really wanted the squiggle to feel like this artifact, this moment, this thing that has kind of jump started an entire movement and appreciation for generative art that we did not have before, and really also honoring the fact that some pieces look really great and also sometimes better as prints than on a digital screen. You can see the detail. I wish I had an up close photo of the subscape, but seeing the subscape by Matt Delorier and Sarah Ridgely's hymens in person were so special. You could see the delicacy. You could see that it really did look like it was created with a human hand, and that was really special. So yeah, I mean, this is something that I felt really strongly about, and it was a moment for the generative art community to get together. We had a lot of talks, and we were all just kind of just chatting about it. And I think this is something that is really special and beautiful about the generative art community. We are all over the place, and a lot of us were able to come together and gather for this. So I also want to talk about, what's next. Here we are, like what's next. So my hope now is that we're going to start connecting the rich history of generative art to where we are now, mostly through exhibitions. And I think through that we'll start to see a lot more people who are somewhat skeptical of the crypto space as a whole maybe start to engage with it, because they see this history of art that is culturally to be able to have important conversations and break out of the grid in which we experience all of the artwork. I think we really need to find a way to get creative of just surfing the web or OpenSea or whatever it may be, and just looking at grids of artwork. I think what was so special about Hick and Nunk when it first got started was that you saw one artwork at a time. You were able to scroll through and you saw the artwork as it was supposed to be seen, and that I think is something that's really important. And I want to see that come out more. And again, we always talk about curation and how important it is, but it definitely it is. And so those are like the two things I think I'm most excited for. And I feel like I probably went through this rather quickly, but I am pretty much done with my presentation. I can dive into any aspect you guys want. I think we can have some fun with Q&A. So yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you so much, Sophia. This has been a fantastic presentation, actually. I think we will have a lot of questions. So, guys, go on and unmute yourself to ask Sophia some questions.
Hi, Sophia. This is Claudia here. I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation. I'm like super new to coding and generative art, so this has been really insightful. I wanted to ask actually, when you were speaking about Dimitri's piece that had sold as an NFT and the collector didn't want the physical piece, I just wanted you to follow up on that, and maybe I'm just asking what happened to the physical piece, or is there any consideration for, does the physical piece now have to be held by a specific collector, or maybe perhaps like by yourself or like an institution? And the reason I ask that is because I'm currently working with the generative art and an analog process, in that I'm like creating these botanical images with AI and then printing them and exposing them to physical cyanotype paper. So I have ultimately like a digital NFT version, and then I have like the physical copy. And the NFTs, I'm going to be minting those as the digital versions, but I'm keeping the physicals. But I'm trying to explore different ideas of like, how can these physical pieces live, in connection to the NFTs, but not like entirely tied to the NFTs, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's a few points to your question. So, to answer the first question was, he did end up taking the piece. He did take the physical. I was like, you have to take it, hang it up in your room, or, hang it out in your house, or put it in storage. I don't care, but it's yours now. So I think when it comes to the physical and digital relationship between NFTs, there are a few different schools of thoughts that are arising, and I think it's important to note that where we are in the kind of timeline of really utilizing NFTs to their full potential is that it's still very early stages. The user experience really isn't built to cater to the transfer of physical goods with the NFTs. So, there's a lot of anonymity around things. You can't really reach out to people who are selling things and trying to understand like, oh, hey, like I bought this NFT from you, like what's your shipping information? And I'll send it on over. Like there are a lot of things that kind of need to happen there. But regardless, there are still two schools of thoughts that I'm starting to see with artists, and this is specific to long form generative art via the lens of Artblocks. So I work with a lot of different artists to offer prints for their projects. One thing that I think is really interesting is that these prints are coming after the NFT has already been created and after they've already been acquired. In my opinion, I think that if there's going to be a print associated with an NFT, it should be very clearly written in the metadata and be very, very clear that there is a physical component to the artwork. Anyway, with that, we have artists who are like, well, this NFT represents the physical artwork. They're one and the same essentially. You can look at the NFT as this idea of deed of ownership, and so once a physical piece is out and the artist signs it, they're only going to create that one signature, that one print of it, and it'll only exist once. So I've seen that, and it becomes somewhat of a headache when someone wants to sell that NFT now and they have to transfer it over. So I've come in as a liaison between these sales. Luckily, I had relationships with all the everyone involved with the sale, and so I was able to grab this artwork that was in New York and facilitate the shipment of it to Geneva. But that's not the case every single time. So there are pros and cons to that. Now, on the other side, we have artists who will think that, okay, this is a digital native artwork. If you buy this NFT and you want to buy it and you want a signed print, great, I will send you a signed print. Now, if you decide to sell this NFT, go ahead. You don't have to send that print. And if the next person who buys it wants a print, I'll send them to you. And so you can kind of take from there that after this artist's lifetime, there will only be a finite amount of signed prints per owner if they decided to sell it or own it, So I think we're also starting to see artists experiment with, there's a product that I'm working on now with a more traditional, I'm not necessarily working on it, but I'm part of this conversation. This artist who's more on the OG spectrum of things, and they're looking to, create NFTs of physical artworks, but they would keep the physical in their archive. So it's somewhat similar to what you were saying, where you would hold on to the physical yourself and allow the digital representation of that, or the digital asset. It's manifestation of the artwork be traded or acquired into someone's collection as a steward, however you want to think about it. It depends on who the collector is and what their intentions are. So it's a multifaceted, there's no right answer. I think right now we're at a point where you really do have to get creative and think thoroughly of when you want to pair a physical counterpart with a digitally native asset.
Completely. Thank you so much. I think that's kind of where I'm sitting at right now. It's like it's kind of like a collaboration. Like I have the digitals as NFTs, and I'm going to keep the physicals for like as long as I can, or until maybe something comes up and there's like an opportunity to perhaps maybe like sell the entire physical collection to a body who is going to like protect it and be a custodian of it. Thank you.
Of course. Does anyone else have any questions? We have some time. Ask me anything.
Hi there, it's Earth Sample here, but you can call me Daniel. I had a question regarding onboarding generative artists, because I have a friend who's like extremely talented when it comes to processing. Like we took it in university for 3-4 years, but he's pretty skeptical about the whole crypto NFT sort of stuff. But I see that he's creating stuff that I know would hit super hard in the space. So like. Obviously I'm not going to like try and be like a snake oil salesman or something like that, but like what was your experience like onboarding people who are more skeptical about this sort of thing?
I think, intentions are everything. With the artists that I was working with, it was just very clear, like, hey, look, I want to do this curation. I want to showcase your artwork in a way that that makes sense. So I think a really good example of this is with Dave White. He goes by Dave Bees and Bombs, I think, or Bees and Bombs online. And for a really long time, he had been making a living doing a lot of commissions. He's a really talented artist in the processing space. And I really kind of just sat down with him one day. I sent him some ETH. I walked him through the process of creating a MetaMask wallet. I was very upfront about the fact that this is not a very easy process. So, the onboarding is difficult. It's a lot. But I was also able to get his work sold almost instantly, which was a really special moment. So and also at that time, I think we minted his work on super rare. So again, it's kind of this idea of like showcasing an emulation of the code in a way where you're kind of creating a screen recording or a photo, and that's completely fine. I think I would really love to see, and right now I haven't seen that many or any. If you guys know any, please tell me. But specific marketplaces that you can go to and mint your processing executable. You know what I mean? That you can actually just like you can actually mint the program itself. I think there's some time there, but I think in general, if they don't want to put their artwork out there, that's one thing. But I think just kind of sitting down with them, the best thing you can do is kind of just sit down with them. And it doesn't have to be Ethereum. If you want to do it on Tezos, sit down with them, get them going, and just pick one artwork and be like, let's see what happens. There's no harm in that. And I think the price point in Tezos is a lot more friendly and digestible for a lot of people. But I think it really is just being their friend, sitting down with them and walking them through it, because this stuff is really daunting. Even on the collector side, I know I have my older sister, for example, was dying to collect artwork, and she, for the life of her, just could not figure it out. And I know that it sounds silly, but it really isn't that easy for people. And so the first 3 times she wanted to collect an artwork, I sat down with her, I walked her through it, and now she feels a little bit more comfortable with these things. But yeah, I think it really, you have to have that personal touch when it comes to onboarding people, especially if they're not naturally interested. It takes a little bit of hand holding for sure.
Got you. Thank you.
Who's next?
Hi, Sophia. How are you? This is Hannah. I first want to thank you so much for everything that you're doing for the generative art community as a generative artist, and the storytelling that you do around our art form. That's absolutely amazing. And I wanted to ask you, what would be your recommendation as a generative artist around the storytelling of our work? Because for me, it's very obvious that my work is made with code, and maybe because I'm so blinded to that, I'm not sure.
I would say you're blinded to it. I would say you're blinded to it. I think one of the so storytelling is it's so important. I think when it comes to generative art specifically, and there are a few ways in which you can do this, but I found that some of the interview, just telling your story and putting that out in a public place is really helpful for people talking about your process. I think 2 people who do this exceptionally well, Tyler Hobbs and Matt Delorier, with their blog posts. If you don't want to do blog posts, you definitely don't have to. You can find a way to kind of tell your story and about your process in any way that you so please. But even if it is like sharing a code snippet, or showing kind of like the before and after of like your process, or some time-lapse video of you coding, something to really like contextualize your creation process. And I think that is probably one of the most special parts of being an artist in today's just in our current timeline. Like we have so much access to collectors and collectors to us, and nothing's kind of like guarded by like these elite, you don't have to be what's his name, Medici, you don't have, you can actually just like have your artwork out there and people can connect with it. So really giving everyone as much context as possible into who you are as an artist makes all the difference in the world. Personally, like I love prototype work. I think one of the first pieces that I collected was a prototype. It's a prototype of a pen plotter that someone did. Like I absolutely love that stuff. So I think just giving as much context as possible into your process is going to be is really helpful. And documenting, I think as an artist, it's so important to document the work that you're doing and why you do it, your process. All of these things are, I can't stress enough how important it is to document your work. So yeah, I mean that would definitely be. Hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, no, that's great. No, yeah, I think your presentation made me realize that as somebody who makes generative art themselves, you kind of forget that it's not obvious to a lot of people what's going on behind the work. So yeah, thank you for this.
Yeah, you have to imagine like you're showing it to your grandmother, like, hey, like look at this art piece I made. Like they have no idea. Like they have no idea what's going on behind the scenes. I think we're lucky though that the new generation will, like the this generation below, like that's growing up now, they're growing up learning how to write code. They'll have the context to understand like, oh, what you're doing is really, really cool. I think people in their 30 to 25 older who maybe didn't have computer programming classes growing up, it's just hard to contextualize. And that's the one of the early slides that I showed like beforehand, I would just look at this type of art also and just be like, oh cool, like that exists. And that's why I always found it really important to have printouts of code so that people could see it. It's important because people don't realize. But yeah. Sorry, I was getting a call. I don't know if things went weird there. Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, what's up?
I was actually just curious, like, where do you see the sort of process of like generative art and code-based art going, like maybe 5 to 10 years from now? Because we have had sort of discussions about utilizing code and generative stuff in sort of like esoteric uses in art ways. And so like how do you see in general like the generative coding stuff going? Because like we're slowly hitting like artworks that are self-evolving, right? Or like for example works like the Zords, where it's like they just change based on like the interaction. And I was just curious about your opinion.
I mean, I think that is the beauty of working with artists. We're going to see what they do. I think this moment that we're in right now is a really special one, and to see how it evolves over the next 5 years. I mean, it might turn into something completely different. I can't. I'm sorry, I can't give you like a direct answer. I'm not the best at telling the future, but I definitely kind of like ride the wave of when things are make sense. I don't know. It's, I see something and I roll with it. But yeah, I mean, long story short, I'm excited to see what artists start to do, because it really is an endless. Opportunities are endless with this, and that's what's so beautiful about code. We can kind of craft it into whatever we want. So let's see. Sorry for my non-answer, but that's the answer. Does anybody else have any questions?
I have a question. Hi, Sophia. This is Anna.
Hello.
I was at a digital art fair and it was beautiful.
Yes.
It was so amazing. I was there with Sarah Ridgely actually, and her pieces were magnificent in print. And coming from a sort of a text background from poetry, wondering if you see potential for sort of generative text taking off in the way generative art has.
Yes, I love generative text. I love poetry. I mean, it's one of like my favorite like artistic mediums out there. I think right now it's definitely in its early stages. There have been artists like yourself and Sarah Steels who have been, on the forefront of this, pushing it. And I think, trying to find now the right collector or just the right patrons who understand is going to be an important part. And I think that's part of more on like the onboarding process because and this is like kind of my view of things that over the last year the influx of users that we saw, unfortunately, the majority of them are more on the flipping side of things. The majority of them are looking to make a quick flip. And so I'm trying, I know that part of my mission here is to onboard more art focused users into this space and to find people who can really see this artwork and appreciate it. And the reason I say this is because, and when we look at Artblocks as a whole, we've seen that projects that are text-based don't do as well. And we've seen projects that are animated also don't do as well as stills. And I think also, you have to remember where we are in this place where everyone's looking at things via a grid. And this is, I think the grid is like, you just see things in a grid and you're like, okay, I see some text here. Okay, I see this piece but you don't see it animating. You don't see it the way that it's supposed to be done, the way that it's actually like supposed to be experienced. So I think generative text is it's like a niche within a niche, which I think is amazing. And now it's time to find the collectors who understand and appreciate it, because I think even the idea of collecting poetry, whether it be generative or not, is a new concept in this way. And so I can't wait for it to kick off. I think once we actually have a like as a society outside of like our crypto friendly cohorts, that we can kind of bring in more of the everyday lay person and have them engage with these marketplaces and this art in a way, again, that just makes sense and is a little bit more intuitive. So I have high hopes for generative text and just like poetry based NFTs. I think now it's just really starting to carefully source the people who get it. And so I think that a part of it's really important for me to do a lot of talks with fine art schools. I think that there's a lot of rhetoric right now around just NFTs and crypto, and that if you do it, you're single-handedly trying to destroy the world. So I started going to a lot of these art schools and talking to the students and kind of debunking a lot of these myths and expressing how important it is for us to get more creatives in the space so that they can appreciate it and engage with the community as a whole. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. And thank you for this talk. It was really fascinating to hear about this history of generative art. I mean, it's really, really amazing, the trajectory that it's had in the past few years.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. It really is. I don't think any of us really expected it, but here we are. Like it's been a really fun ride. So thank you guys, honestly, for sticking around and listening. And if anyone else has any questions, I think we still have some time. I'm happy to chat about whatever.
Hey, Sophia, really loved your talk. This has just been super interesting to see kind of almost behind the curtain from someone who's been a little bit more involved, quite a bit more involved, excuse me, in the space for a number of years now too. You answered a question earlier just about the need for like storytelling and contextualizing your creation process, which I found super valuable because I've always kind of come from a sort of more generative, more AI leaning, but generative background when it comes to artwork. The thing that I've always struggled with when it comes to my own artwork, and I think some of this comes from a sort of imposter syndrome, questioning my own abilities, is, with a lot of traditional art, no matter what the medium is, there's always, when it's like talking about the art, when contextualizing the art, there's always a form of sort of like meaning behind it, like painting, movie, even with still artwork, like painting as an example, there's a sort of like representation. This means something more than just the pastels on the canvas or whatever. But what I'm hearing you say to a certain extent is that oftentimes it's okay for artwork to just look attractive, to look pretty, to look nice, or at least be, visually appealing or challenging even. And the underlying story doesn't need to be more than the process. Am I hearing that correctly? Is there more you can kind of say about that?
Yeah, because I think the creation side of this, the process, is part of the art form. We don't know, like, the delight of not knowing what you're going to get out from the program when you're kind of, you're debugging things and you're playing around, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, like, holy shit, this looks really great. And I think, that is totally part of it. And, the collaboration between yourself and the computer and the program or whatever it is that you're using is enough, like it doesn't have to be like, I'm trying to tell this story or this story. No, you're using your mind to experiment with forms and shapes that are of interest to you. And you kind of go from there. I think Helena Sarin is actually a really she does a really great job, I think, in doing this, where she creates meaning out of the artworks that she creates. So what she'll do is that she works in GAN models, and she doesn't pick, she has no idea what the final output's going to be, but what she does is then she creates a story around that, and she creates captions that like will kind of create something. She created a comic book out of GAN, like out of her artwork, and she created a storyline out of artwork that had essentially no prior meaning to it before she gave it a meaning, if that makes any sense. So she was able to take these pieces that had no form and create an entire storyline called the Book of Genesis, and it was kind of this take on the Book of Genesis, and kind of a ton of puns on AI stuff. But it's the same idea where the final output is what you want to kind of want it to be in any shape or form. You can make it untitled, but talk about the entire process. It's so important. So yeah. Hopefully I didn't go
Thank
off.
you. Yeah.
Okay,
No,
cool.
no, no. I actually appreciate that too. I've never heard of Helena. What was her
Yeah,
last name?
Sarin. I'll write it in the
Sadine. Oh, amazing.
S.
Thank you.
Yeah, she's incredible. She's actually Russian. She left Russia many moons ago, lived in Israel, then came to the United States. She worked out Bell Labs. She's she's a OG also. She's been doing, this type of work for a really long time. So yeah, she's super cool. Big fan.
Amazing. No, I appreciate that. There's also just like the concept of, there's just been a explosion of GAN-based artwork as well, and it's like, where's the line between you're just using this tool and what like actually determines it as being artwork? Do you have any thoughts on that as well?
I do. I think that you want to have as close of a relationship with the model that's being like produced as like, you want to be able to like at least edit some of the code behind it. I think a lot of this ready-made stuff is fun. I think it's novel. That you can do that, but I think the art form comes when you are really engaged with all sides of it, not just curating. Curating a data set is also equally important, and curating one that is your own. So I think another cool side of, and just Helena's a GAN artist that I've worked with a lot, so I just have a lot of context into her work. So I'll use that as an example again. She her data sets are created with her own artwork. So she trains these models on her drawings, on her paintings, creates sculptures with them, all of these things. So I think, the data set is also like a huge, huge, huge part of the artistic process that can't be, minimized. But I also think, having some sort of relationship with the model creation is equally important. And I think, and this is also just, I personally have never created AI artwork, so I might be missing some context here. But just speaking to other artists who are in the space, I know that they feel a certain type of way with kind of like ready to go GAN models that you just throw things in and it creates work. So I don't know if that's just just the way that it goes. Maybe I'm missing something, but that's my surface thought on that.
Thank you, I
If that-
appreciate it. It does, yeah. I think there's
Okay.
there's so many ready-made tools that
Yeah.
it can be really easy, but I think I appreciate your point on like sometimes it's really just about the data set that you're throwing in as well.
Mhm.
Like no one's expecting you to like reinvent the wheel, so to speak. Like no one artist has the ability to like outperform Google's AI lab for creating like
Yeah.
GAN.
No,
But
and I
like
think everyone can admit that GANs are and just neural networks are a black box. They're a black box. We have no idea what's going on in there. So yeah, it is what it is.
thank you.
Sophia, we have a typed question on our chat. I don't know if you can see it.
Oh yeah, let's see. Yeah. I'm just gonna read it out loud. Okay. This has been such a good time. I'm from a drawing background and I'm trying to find a way to experiment with code and digital while keeping things in mind so it still sort of has my hand and doesn't look like a lot of other people's work. Do you have any experience in plotting? The plotter, isn't that what it's called? The computer controlled pen. I see a lot of digital artists using. Yes. Okay, so I love plotter work. I think it's one of the it's something that I am actually definitely obsessed with. And a lot of the early works that I was collecting were all plotter pieces. I would definitely recommend you take a look at Tyler Hobbs' early work, where he includes his own like hands, like that he drew in his generative systems. He had reprogrammed a tablet, a Wacom tablet, and took it to a figure drawing class. Using that, he then took his sketches, using this triangulation method, triangle packing, I believe it was called. He basically converted all of his drawings into one single line using triangles, and then had it outputted with a pen plotter, and they're stunning. They're absolutely stunning. I'm gonna try and find a link for you so you could see, because it's incredible. But I am actually so obsessed with artwork that can honor the hand, the organic feeling of drawing and painting or whatever it may be, while also honoring like what the computer can do. So I would love to see what you kind of experiment with, and definitely take a look into plotting. I think that sounds incredible. One of the pieces that I spoke about earlier that I collected was a prototype of someone experimenting with Tyler Hobbs, experimenting with a paintbrush and a pen plotter, and it was him drawing out heads. It was like him experimenting with using a paintbrush with a pen plotter and drawing out a few different heads on newspaper print, and it's super cool. So yes, definitely do it. There's another artist, I think it's Joanne. I might be spelling her name wrong, so I'm sorry, but Joanne Hasty. Joanne Hasty. I don't know, but she also works with the pen plotter in a really, really cool way. So take a look. If I got her name wrong, I'm sorry, but I'm pretty sure that's her last name. Let me actually find this. Oh wait, Twitter. Oh, you guys can still see my screen, right? Yeah, that's fine. Joanne Hasty. Yes, I got it right. Okay, she does some really cool stuff. Let's see if I can find some cool pieces here. Sorry, guys. But if anyone has any more questions while I kind of try to pop this up, she just does
Hi.
really, yeah.
Cool. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Sorry for the background sounds. But I really appreciated your talk. It was really great. And I wanted to ask, so I work a lot with storytelling and storytelling with different, it's like VR and also film documentary and sort of visual, combination of visual, kind of different visual formats and storytelling. I've been looking, one of the projects that I'm working with kind of recorded histories, oral histories, and I'm interested in looking at, I know that there's like kind of AI storytelling, and there's different really interesting ways of, well, I guess both. Yeah, I'm just curious if you have, what I'm looking to see is where, I'm trying to figure out where do I start, basically taking those kind of like old, like oral histories and sort of passing them, I don't know, like experimenting with different algorithms to see what sorts of stories they may generate for the future, kind of bridging like the past and the future, if that makes sense. I'm curious if you just might have any suggestions about, it's a lot about memory, but also kind of future visioning, future world building.
Oh man, I feel like there are a lot of different ways that you can go about this. I'm sure Anna has some thoughts on that too. But I mean, I think there's one on the JavaScript side. I know that there's a library that does natural language processing called Rita.js. Rita. .js, but I think this could also be something that you could train, like that would be fun to play around with AI and see what it, like if you train it on a few of these different like oral histories of specific, like from a specific movement and see what story comes out from that, would be really interesting and cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
So it's Rita.js.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I worked with it a few years ago. I don't know if there's probably something better at this point. But if anyone working in the tech space has any option, like anything, please write it in the chat that I might be missing. But those are just, those are my thoughts.
Cool, thank you.
You're welcome. And then when you're done with that, please like send it to me. This sounds super interesting.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I'm not a very technical person myself, but I've just been sort of looking into it, and I know that it's kind of it's becoming a a newer thing with storytelling. So yeah, I'm really excited. Thank you.
Do we have any other question? Well, in the meantime, I would love to make ask a question actually. So, yeah. So, speaking of curating and a physical exhibition, I was wondering what was the most challenging thing in creating a physical exhibition for algorithmic art? Because you mentioned something about the printed version of the artwork, so it would be very interesting for you to deep dive into this topic if you want to, of course.
Yeah. I mean, I think when doing an exhibition, especially with a lot of different artists, I think there are a lot of different conversations at play. Like one, making sure that if you see, I'm going to use a Fidenza as an example because I think this was a perfect one where the Fidenza is a native artwork. It's a digital native artwork. I thought it would be cool to showcase it on a screen, but because of its aspect ratio, actually, it didn't there was no screen to really showcase it accordingly. So we ended up doing a high resolution print, which was great. I think another side, a really good example of this too is with Casey Reese. Casey Reese's pieces, they are circular and they animate. And so I remember asking him, I was going back and forth, how should I showcase this work? What should I do? And so I honestly, I called him, I asked him like, hey, like how should I showcase this work in a way that makes sense? What do you think? And he had a really elegant answer. And he was like, hey, you can create these 3 discs and then project onto them. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. I should have just done that. So we did. And so I've put a picture here up in the chat so you guys can take a look. But that was one that was really boggling my mind, because I had at this point ordered some square screens. I was like, should I create a porthole and like I can hide the other sides of the screen, and all these things. And all I had to do was really ask the artist, like, how do you envision this being showcased? Another thing that I cannot stress enough is wire management. Really hiding the wires as best as possible, and really create the illusion of, especially when it comes to framed pieces, that you really are just looking at a frame on the wall, very Harry Potter-esque in a way. So I'll just show this one more time. This to me was the most important thing. If in showcasing the works, that these are digital screens, they're animating, you're seeing the work as it should be, but you don't see a wire anywhere, and it doesn't really, you don't want to break that illusion. So yeah, those are the things that I keep in mind.
I think it is extremely challenging to cover wires on wires on wires. I think
It's a lot. I mean, we thank God, finding sponsors for the event was of the utmost importance for us to make sure that we can do it the way that we wanted to. And yeah, I think the production team was up for the challenge. So actually, all the walls that you see in the space were this space was complete, which was great, especially for more of like the freestanding. You can't really see any here, but like these freestanding walls here, they're hollow, so all of the wires kind of ran through the center of them.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think we have a question in the chat again from Santiago.
Okay. Let's see. I have a question. I do some things with code, very basic, and I'm stuck. I would like to learn more. I have been watching the coding train, but any other beginners resources that come to your mind now? One thing that I would also do is probably just take a look online. So, what was it? Processing, openprocessing.org, I believe, is a really great resource for different things. That's a really awesome spot. And then there are so many books that you can read that really kind of go into different parts of this. So Nature of Code, if you want to kind of take it another step forward, I would definitely take a look at Nature of Code. There's also books on P5. It's little things, but yes. Oh, thank you, the library. I was going to say that I have a few books I think that were really great for me personally in getting into this. So yeah, definitely, like there are so many different resources out there, but it's really great to be able to see other people's code too and kind of get inspired and kick off from there. Obviously, don't copy it and call your own. Just had to say that. Not that you would, but just anyone else out there, if you are going around on open processing and taking a look at people's code, respect that. Use it as a jumping off point. Also, CodePen is another one, but I think that's more for front end development versus processing, like open processing is. So that would keep it moving. I think also another good challenge is if you go through some older works, or works by people that you've seen, try to recreate it. Challenge yourself, give yourself a challenge to produce something, and go from there, because you can do tutorials all day long, but things aren't really going to solidify and push forward unless you challenge yourself to do something a little bit outside of your comfort zone and try to find the solutions for them. So I would definitely recommend just, after reading all of these different things, try to, but if not, there's something to be, I'm happy to answer.
Well, I think this is a sign that we covered everything. So I was just browsing, on the ARTXCODE website, and I was like, the first time that I see a library on Web3 website. So I was totally, for discovering so much, books and, things to read. So except others, besides of articles that, that everything is written on the article. So it was great to see a library.
Yeah, I'm back.
And yeah. So if anyone, if we don't have any other question, I think we can, come on.
Okay, great.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. No, I think we just ended. The and we just finished the energy of our residents today. So
Yeah.
thank you. So thank you so much, Sophia. I think that this was an amazing presentation, and thank you so much for being here. I know that this was your first time in the BCA residency, and it was splendid. So thank you so much, and thank you for all of you for your participation and your questions.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, guys.